All right, so today we're going to be getting into the concept of open source and what exactly that entails. So, open source, just to start out, would be what we consider a type of computer software, although it's expanded a little bit past the realms of just software. So, open source would be a product where you would need a code or a license to access. So, this would include documents, content, data, other applications you may use, systems of analysis, things in Google we'd be most accustomed to. Open source allows us the ability to expand into open content and other realms of creativity within the application world. So some of the origins of open source, first known we have would be from the Adobe Software Summit, where open source was used and given its proper term in April of 1998. And this was basically in a summit in the dawn of the internet, in trying to show exactly what an open internet forum could exactly provide for the outside world. The whole idea of open source was seen as free software, sourceware, freeware, other terms that were discussed, but ultimately open source was the name that was given. A vote was held for the term, in fact, and the Apache server was the first to implement. That is what we now know as HTTP. When we see that, that is an origin of open source. But as a whole, it was meant to serve the different community projects and to provide a medium for sharing, creating, and exploring different content. So the basis of open source, it's meant to be decentralized from a central recognition system, as say Microsoft would be from its applications or its parent source. So it encourages the open collaboration of different sources and licenses, and it's made available to a wide variety of different users who may be interested in these things. So, say anyone who participates or chooses not to participate, they have the same freedoms to change, improve upon, or edit these different open sources. So, contributors, non-contributors. It's also not specific to an economic background, or it's not a monetary system where you'll have to, say, pay to download an application. Most of these things are free. They're made available to a wide variety of people, no matter what application they have, no matter what software system they have, no matter what kind of license they have. So it's very accessible. So to build on that, on the basis, pure production is key in open source and improving upon the open source applications. So in, say, Linux, pure production is what guides all of the creation of these applications. Once someone has a code, rather than have to pay for a new version as you would with, say, a Microsoft application, through pure production, these open sources are able to be improved upon greatly. That goes for blueprints, documentation, proprietary code. Proprietary code would go along the lines of, say, the code you need to access these different applications, which is most often used in, say, a Linux. It's accessible to whoever would want it. And the people making these edits are most likely responsible in their respective fields. So with group effort, the mass participation breeds perfection, as they tend to say. The more people you have doing checks on these things and running different tests, it's more likely to be perfected. So as a product of open source, some things that would stem from this, say internet forums, online communities. This would be for, say a blog perhaps, or a Reddit, a Yahoo Answers, any of these things, where people are contributing to give different answers, insight, giving their own solutions to things. This is all a product of open source, where if there was one all-encompassing word for open source, it would be collaboration. Collaboration is key in managing the whole world of open source: storage, processing speed, software sustainment, vendor application. All of these things are very, very essential in maintaining the integrity and the accuracy of open source and what people can do with it. And how accurate whatever application you would use with this is ultimately up to you. One person may use a different application on, say, like a Linux or Redbox, or, sorry, Red Hat than you would. You may use another, and that's part of the beauty of this application. So through different diversified ventures, more broad social media platforms are able to be created. It's more accessible. Open software entertainment is very accessible, and the potential of these sources is unhinged. So some examples would be what we know as TEDx, which is where people can collaborate in a different variety of speeches, information. Bitcoin has no centralized body either that relies solely upon the people that are running Bitcoin. Wikipedia is another one where there are many creators being processed and putting their information through different sources into one database. It's a collaborative effort. All of these have greatly expanded on the potential and possibilities of open source and what it's capable of. So some more applications, as we had mentioned before, blogs and opinion pages rely on open source heavily. This would include Reddit. This would include, as you said, Quora. This would include any comment sections on other applications, any feedback being given all through websites. This is all open content that we use and is widely accessible to a wide variety of people who just have access to the application, not necessarily access to the software. So open source is very, very unique and accessible in that sense. Creative Commons, crowdsourcing, all these things can be accessed once someone has the code or the license to a bit of software that can be created and edited upon. And collaborative consumption, another one. This allows for innovation of ideas, of different types of improvements upon, say, something Windows would be doing. Collaborative communication makes it to where a Windows application or even a Google application can be improved upon by the people that are editing this software. Makes it extremely easy for a meeting place among different collaborators, and it has tremendous group potential as a whole. So with such collaboration, it is important that there's a sense of responsibility in making these edits. So obviously, when you think of an open license or an open code for someone, you would say, well, they could do it for malpractice. That could be more harm than good. In most cases, this isn't the case, but it is definitely possible that hackers and, like we said, editors who have malintent could get into these things. But as a whole, collaboration relies on three principles that we can use to better guide responsible collaboration. One would be egalitarianism. This prioritizes equality for all. So you're able to collaborate based not solely upon the conditions you're born into, the conditions that you're given or are able to access, but just the knowledge and your intentions as a whole going into collaboration. Meritocracy, success based on merit, that builds off the first one. This is success not based on what you're given, but success based on, say, what you're able to collaborate to an open forum. And self-organization, so finding grouping in an unorganized system. This would just be, say, computer collaborators coming together into one to form an alliance of creators in an open source situation. So a key part of open source would be the licenses that you have to be given. And so essentially these licenses are free most of the time. They don't have to be necessarily, most of the time they are. These licenses give access to design, blueprint, and redistribution. So what you can do once you have a license, you're able to design the software, edit the software, access the blueprint upon which the software was initially built, and redistribute it to other people, give them the license. So with these, you have freedom from copyright, licensing, domain errors, consumer issues. So there's a lot less legal trouble involved in using an open source application, as you're much more able and readily available to have applications right on hand. So some of the users of open source, and this is where you really get into a broad variety of people. Internet users as a whole, if you were an internet user, you've likely used something that's based on open source. We'll get into Chromium in a second, but that is definitely something that most internet users would be familiar with. commercial companies use open source. This would be to better improve upon their own software that they're creating, or to use the software of these open sources to better improve upon their businesses, to get better ideas, to share data, to share ideas. All that is made much easier through a collaborative effort. Developers are able to customize. Developers are able to better design their new materials. As we said, that kind of goes along with the commercial companies. And as a whole, though, anyone who has any interest in, as we said, customization, curiosity, out of the curiosity of someone who's just say a Windows or a Microsoft Office user, curiosity may be there to look at Linux, say, for instance, look at their applications, go the free route, see how that works, troubleshooting to see how you can fix your own applications. And as a whole, as I've been driving home, collaboration and collective efforts are at the key of this cloud of open source applications. So the field of open source not at all limited to computerized jobs. We're now using this in a wide variety of different fields. Say, for instance, the automotive industry can be used to make improvements upon different automobiles, different vehicles, different design types. This is a good thing to be able to troubleshoot and better fix some of the errors in, say, your product, in this case, cars. Telecommunications, same with that. Renewable energy, medical practices, especially medical practices. This is one where you are getting doctors, surgeons, and medical researchers at universities are better able to share, distribute, edit upon, contribute to the data and information within their fields. And this allows for, again, the consistency. It's trial through numbers. You're able to better get an idea of what exactly is accurate and what exactly is not. So as a whole, though, companies may share and contribute to this data. Some may choose not to if they're competitors with one another, but as a whole, everyone benefits when there's open information available to everyone. Like we said, a great example of this, Wikipedia. That's open collaborators communicating in an open forum space, and everyone is able to benefit from that with just the knowledge, whether it be accurate or not, and that's one of the risks you run. But as a whole, everyone's able to benefit from this knowledge, and it better helps to promote data management and data sharing within an industry. So there are some restrictions on open source to note. Non-commercial distribution. This basically means that redistributing and modifying a license can be somewhat restricted if the user would hope it to be. That wouldn't be true open source, but there can be some restrictions. Expression of source code, copyright statements within code. This is basically not giving credit to the creators of an open source. So in the case of, say, a Linux application, say you're using their version of an Excel you're using, if you weren't to give credit to the original authors, creators, or copyright the initial code, that would be about your only hang up from a legal standpoint. Just giving the origin is important. As a whole, though, what we can call the open source initiative would be the focal point of the open source movement. So it's a nonprofit organization founded in 1998, right along the time when the term was founded. And it's intended to encourage collaboration responsibly. It's provided as an open source definition. That's what it gives. While it's not a governing body, it acts as a body that most open source creators can adhere by. It's almost an unwritten rule. The de facto leader of the open source movement. And it more abides by the rules of its own organization than the rules of, say, the internet community. This is very useful just for organization among open source drivers. As we said, it's born from a hacker culture, but their philosophy differs from this. They promote business ideals, business-centric grounds for their work. There's an ethical imperative that they use in their drive for creation and sharing. Their drive is obviously not to promote hacking. They have a business-centric, knowledge-centric goal in mind. So also to be tied to this, open source in the cloud, eventually these things have to come together and have come together the cloud really perfectly complements open source. There's the accessibility on the cloud gives accessibility to open source applications found on the internet. So really they go hand in hand. Say from your smartphone, smart device, you're able to access applications on the cloud from which there you can access applications in the open source. So licenses are specific to cloud applications, which is a great tool if you were using, say, something that's not a Mac, not a Windows computer. Whatever PC you'd like is accessible with that. Whatever smart device you'd like is accessible with that. When made public, Google Drive would be the biggest example. Google Drive, as we all know, is on the cloud, and it spawns from open source, as we'll see coming up next. Chromium, which funds and runs the Google Drive and Google as a whole, is based on open source. So it's spawned through collaboration. Chromium, before its adoption by Google, was edited upon and improved upon by different users. The tight application linkage and tight integration is just what would most likely drive this type of system. Linux is a great example of this as well. Variety of applications, fixes, downloads from there you can get all for virtually free. It's fun to mess around with if you get the chance. So as a whole, though, the future of open source looks very bright for us. Right now it's being used as one of the most common business models. Just recently, Red Hat was acquired by IBM, Red Hat being an open source forum, for $32 million. This is chump change also compared to the value of, say, Chromium, which is developed from open source. The value in total licenses is estimated in multi-billions. The potential to grow, definitely there. Investing in research is best done in group collaboration, which would lend itself to an open forum. And singular work is being left in the past, moreover. So the potential being immeasurable, the cost is just, they're essentially nothing when you take, for instance, the cost of Wikipedia is nothing to the user, nothing to the creator. Everyone benefits on that end. The cost of Bitcoin, same thing. The cost of TEDx, you're exchanging information, and it's of very little cost to anybody. It benefits corporations, creators, designers, business people. Most parties we see maximize their potential by using this. So to summarize, we went over in all this what open source is, what the origins of open source are, the basis of open source, the products that we use in this regard, the applications we use in that regard, responsible collaboration, how licenses factor into all this, the users of open source, the different fields of open source, some of the restrictions we see on this process, the open source initiative company and organization, the nonprofit, open source and how it relates to the cloud, and the overall future of open source, what we will see coming soon. Hopefully this gave a good overview of how exactly open source has helped us in our just in our transition into the internet age. Right now it's becoming a focal point for creators, designers, business people alike, and we look forward to seeing what it will hold in the future. Thank you very much.